Well, the news today from Labor's new National Anti-Corruption Commission. It announced today, oh no, nothing to see here, no corruption issue in Labor's extraordinary decision to pay Brittany Higgins $2.4 million. It says this payout was based on advice from independent lawyers. No Albanese government minister inappropriately intervened, although, hello, the government's Attorney General did approve this payout and did something else that we'll get to. Higgins, of course, is the former Liberal staffer who said she was raped by a colleague in the office of the Defence Minister after a drunken night out. Now, a judge later ruled that the rape happened on the balance of probabilities, but he said that Higgins had made untrue claims against her bosses in the Morrison government, Ministers Linda Reynolds and Michaelia Cash, claims that they'd treated her badly, tried to stop her going to the police. Untrue. Yet Labor, of course, exploited these claims to beat the Morrison government in the election 3 years ago. So Anthony Albanese and his new government, they had lots of reasons to be grateful to Higgins. And they gave her this extraordinary $2.4 million payout after just 1 day of mediation with Higgins' two former bosses, Linda Reynolds and Michaelia Cash, actually banned by the government from attending the mediation to say that Higgins' claims that had treated her badly were actually false. But there was more. The deed of settlement included not just compensation for the supposed bad treatment, but nearly $1.5 million paid in respect, it said, for Miss Higgins' loss of earning capacity after the government apparently accepted her claim that she'd been diagnosed as medically unfit for any form of employment and had been given a very poor prognosis for future employment. Yet hallelujah, Higgins has since volunteered and worked in several largely unpaid jobs, United Nations intern, writing for the Queensland Human Rights Commission, working Victoria's First Peoples Assembly, becoming a fellow of an institute run by former Labor Prime Minister Julia Gillard, and now she's announced she's a Director of Public Affairs at a public relations agency. Well, Reynolds, who's Higgins' former boss, she was the one who referred this payout to the National Anti-Corruption Commission. She today says she's bitterly disappointed it won't now be formally investigated. Joining me is Chris Merritt, Vice President of the Rule of Law Institute of Australia. Chris Merritt, thank you so much for your time. Your reaction to this decision, does it seem a fair one?
Well, it's a victory. I would describe it as victory of form over substance. It seems pretty clear that the Anti-Corruption Commission has gone through this and ticked all the boxes to see whether proper procedure has been followed. But there are two enormous loopholes here. One, Brittany Higgins was not a public servant at the time of the settlement, the payout. Therefore, anything misleading that she presented during this discussion is beyond the remit of the Anti-Corruption Commission. That's loophole one. Loophole two is this. The rules for settlements of monetary claims against the Commonwealth, significant monetary claims against the Commonwealth, are set down in chapter and verse in Appendix C of the Legal Services Directions of the Commonwealth. And if you look at them, they're very reasonable. They say there's got to be all sorts of checks and balances. There's got to be a meaningful prospect of liability. But right down the end, the last sentence says the Attorney General, however, can set aside these rules and introduce new rules of his own. Now, when you look at this, what's happened is the two witnesses, Michaelia Cash and Senator Reynolds, who could have been in a position to test any assertions made by Brittany Higgins, were excluded from this mediation. We've got no real explanation about why that was considered necessary. All that we've got from the Commission is a bald assertion that Senator Reynolds' interests were not compromised, that she did not incur any liability as a result of this, and that is true. But we're talking about taxpayers' money being paid out the door here. This is not a private dispute between Senator Reynolds and Brittany Higgins. This is a dispute between federal taxpayers and a disgruntled former Commonwealth employee. And I would have thought that if we're going to prevent settlements without sufficient rigour in future, that it would have been nice for the Commission to have said something a little bit more rigorous about the ease with which the apparent rigour of Appendix C can be bypassed.
Well, so they've concluded it was a fair enough settlement, given that the government had every right to ban the key witnesses from giving evidence against it. I mean, it's just extraordinary. Now, there were allegations that Reynolds had tried to stop Brittany Higgins from going to the police with this rape claim, all of which a judge later said, well, that's not true. Well, this judgment says that, well, she wasn't materially affected by this case. Well, she wasn't materially affected if you're talking about money, Chris, but her reputation was damaged. And that's why she said today she's bitterly disappointed. Doesn't that count for anything?
I think it should. But I think the more significant point is that taxpayers should be bitterly disappointed by this. Clearly, the legal services directions are fundamentally flawed. If the purpose of these directions is to ensure that taxpayers' money is properly expended and not dissipated at the for collateral reasons, let's put it that way, these rules are not sufficient. They're not up to the job. There should be no ability for any politician to simply determine that rules requiring rigour should be set aside and replaced with rules that a politician chooses to put in place. It's too open to abuse.
Chris Merritt, thank you so much for getting to the bottom of that one. Thank you.